The courtroom in Fairmont, Montana, stood as a solemn testament to the town's commitment to justice. Its red brick walls weathered by over a century of mountain winds, and its interior steeped in the echoes of countless verdicts. On a crisp spring morning in April 2024, the room buzzed with the usual assembly of defendants, attorneys, and curious onlookers, the wooden benches creaking under their collective weight as they shifted in anticipation of the day's proceedings. Fairmont, a small town cradled in the rugged embrace of the Rocky Mountains, thrived on the toil of ranching and mining. Its courthouse a sturdy structure built in the early 1900s, its clock tower a landmark visible from the winding trails below. The air was cool, carrying the fresh scent of pine and the faint earthy aroma of melting snow from the peaks, filtering through the high windows that framed a view of distant ridges. Yet, the atmosphere inside was thick with an unspoken tension, a palpable sense of something momentous brewing beneath the surface. The clock on the wall ticked with a steady rhythm, its hands marking the passage of time with an almost ominous precision, while sunlight streamed in, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards polished by decades of footsteps. On this day, the docket was crowded with routine cases, traffic violations, petty thefts, and minor disputes over land boundaries. But one case stood out, drawing a larger crowd than usual, their hushed whispers filling the air with speculation about the single mother whose life hung in the balance, her story a quiet undercurrent in the town's collective consciousness. The woman at the heart of this unfolding drama was Vanessa Hayes, a 34-year-old single mother whose life had been a relentless odyssey of survival, sacrifice, and quiet resilience. Vanessa possessed a gentle face, her soft green eyes reflecting a deep well of sorrow tempered by an unyielding strength forged through years of hardship, her light freckled complexion flushed with the nervous energy of the moment as she stood before the judge. Her blonde hair, streaked with the faintest hints of sun-bleached strands from her outdoor chores and the long walks to work, was tied back in a practical braid that swung slightly with her movements. A simple style that spoke of her no-frills approach to life. Her expression bore the subtle lines of exhaustion, etched by years of shouldering burdens alone, lines that deepened with each sleepless night spent worrying about her children's future. Vanessa worked as a caregiver at the Fairmont nursing home, a job that demanded her patience and kindness as she tended to the elderly, with a tenderness that earned their affection, often staying late to read to them or adjust their blankets, while simultaneously raising her two young children single-handedly in a world that offered little support. Her daughter, 7-year-old Lily, was a curious soul with a passion for animals, often sketching horses and dogs in a tattered notebook she carried everywhere, her drawings a vivid escape from the realities of their cramped life, dreaming of one day owning a pet to call her own. Her son, 4-year-old Noah, was a whirlwind of energy, his bright laughter and endless questions about the mountains and stars keeping Vanessa on her toes, his innocence a beacon in her weary days. Vanessa's days were a relentless cycle of early morning shifts that began before dawn, school runs along the winding mountain roads where she prayed for safe passage, and meticulous budgeting of every penny in their cramped apartment on the town's outskirts, where the walls were thin and the heater sputtered during the long, cold Montana winters, forcing her to bundle the children in extra blankets. That morning, Vanessa stood before the bench in a faded floral dress, a garment she had worn to her sister's wedding years ago and carefully preserved for special occasions, despite its frayed hems and faded colors, a relic of happier times now pressed into service for this dire moment. Her hands were clasped tightly, fingers twisting the fabric nervously as she tried to steady her trembling, her heart pounding with the weight of the moment and the eyes of the courtroom upon her. She was accused of forgery, A $200 bad check written at Grayson's hardware store to purchase plywood and tarps for a leaking roof that had threatened her home during a fierce spring storm that had battered the town with relentless rain. It was her first offense, a desperate act born from a payroll delay at the nursing home that left her account empty, the storm's fury pouring through the ceiling and soaking her children's beds, leaving mold spots on the walls and a chill that seeped into their bones. She had contacted the store owner, Harold Grayson, a gruff man with a reputation for inflexibility and a history of disputes with struggling families, to explain her situation and promise repayment. Her voice breaking as she pleaded over the phone, but he refused to listen, his cold determination to press charges overriding her tearful explanation. Now she faced the judge, her future teetering on the edge of ruin, the possibility of losing her children and home looming like a dark cloud. Presiding over the case was Judge Leonard Vaughn, a 60-year-old man renowned for his uncompromising rulings, a figure whose presence dominated the courtroom with an almost palpable authority. He had thinning white hair that gleamed under the courtroom lights, sharp brown eyes magnified by thick glasses that gave him a piercing gaze capable of silencing a room, and a face etched with deep lines from decades of dispensing justice with a heavy hand. Known as Vaughn the Unyielding, he had served Fairmont for 25 years, his philosophy rooted in the belief that tough sentences were the only way to maintain order in a town where lawlessness could easily take hold, a belief honed during his early career when he witnessed the chaos of unchecked crime. His black robe hung heavily on his broad shoulders, a symbol of his authority that seemed to grow heavier with each passing year, and his gavel rested on the bench like a silent threat, its polished wood a constant reminder of his power to enforce his will. The prosecutor, Karen Ellis, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and a reputation for thoroughness, presented the case with clinical precision, her voice steady as she laid out the facts. Your Honor, the defendant knowingly issued a bad check, defrauding Grayson's hardware to the tune of $200. This is a clear violation that erodes the trust of local businesses and must be addressed with severity. Vanessa's public defender, Alex Rivera, a young man with tired eyes from an overburdened caseload and a passion for his client's stories, pleaded for mercy, his tone earnest as he leaned on the table. Ms. Hayes is a single mother with no criminal history, Your Honor. This was an act of desperation due to a payroll error at her workplace, leaving her without funds to repair her storm-damaged home. We request probation and restitution to allow her to support her family and repay the amount without further punishment. Judge Vaughn listened, his expression a mask of stone, his fingers tapping lightly on the gavel as if eager to conclude the matter and move on to the next case, his impatience a silent undercurrent in the room. When it came time for sentencing, he leaned forward, his voice booming with a cold finality that reverberated off the walls and seemed to shake the very benches. Ms. Hayes, forgery is a serious crime that undermines the integrity of our community. You chose to break the law, knowing your account was insufficient, and you must face the consequences to set an example for others. I sentence you to 8 months in county jail and impose a $3,000 fine to cover the damages and deter future offenses. The courtroom gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air from the room, the sound mingling with the creak of benches as people shifted in shock, their faces reflecting a mix of disbelief and outrage. Vanessa's legs buckled, her knees giving way as tears streamed down her face, her hands gripping the table for support as the reality of the sentence sank in like a physical blow. 8 months would mean her children being placed with her aging mother, Margaret, who struggled with arthritis and could barely manage her own care, her trembling hands a testament to her frailty, losing her job at the nursing home where she was a vital presence beloved by the residents, and her apartment being reclaimed by a landlord who had already issued a warning notice taped to her door. The sentence was severe for a first-time offense, a punishment that seemed to disregard her circumstances entirely, reducing her to a label rather than a person with a story. Whispers filled the room. Too harsh, unfair. As heads shook and glances were exchanged, some spectators clutching their hats in frustration. Alex Rivera objected, his voice rising in protest as he cited legal precedents, but Vaughn's gavel struck with a sharp crack that silenced the room, its echo lingering like a judge's decree. The sentence stands. Bailiff, take her into custody. As the bailiff, Officer Dan Carter, a burly man with a stern expression and a reputation for following orders without question, stepped forward to lead Vanessa away. His heavy boots thudding against the floor, a woman in the back row stood up. She was a stranger to most, a petite figure dressed in a conservative black dress that contrasted with the casual attire of the crowd, her face partially obscured by the wide brim of a black hat that cast a shadow over her features, adding an air of mystery. The room fell silent, the tension thickening as she cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the stillness with a clarity and authority that demanded attention, turning heads and stilling conversations. Your Honor, if I may speak before you adjourn this case and finalize this young woman's fate? Judge Vaughn frowned, his irritation evident as he adjusted his glasses with a deliberate motion, peering down at the interruption with a scowl that creased his forehead. This is not a public forum, madam. Who are you and what gives you the right to interrupt these proceedings and challenge the court's authority? The woman removed her hat with a deliberate motion, her fingers steady as she revealed short gray hair, neatly styled with a precision that spoke of discipline, and piercing blue eyes that met the judge's gaze with an unwavering confidence that seemed to pierce through his stern facade. My name is Dr. Evelyn Whitaker, and I have information that might persuade you to reconsider this sentence and offer a path toward a more just outcome. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, a ripple of surprise spreading through the crowd as they turned to one another, whispering in disbelief, their voices a low hum that filled the space. Who was this woman? And what could she possibly know that would sway the unyielding judge, a man known for his inflexibility? Fairmont wasn't a town accustomed to courtroom spectacles of this magnitude, its quiet existence disrupted only by the occasional festival or natural event. Nestled among towering pines and rugged peaks that loomed like silent guardians, it lived by the rhythm of the seasons, skiing in the snowy winters when the town transformed into a winter wonderland, hiking through the wildflower-strewn summers when the meadows burst with color, and the courthouse typically handled mundane matters like property disputes over grazing rights, DUIs from late-night gatherings, and occasional thefts of tools from unattended barns. The spectators, a mix of ranchers in worn boots caked with mud, locals in flannel shirts with pockets stuffed with handkerchiefs, and a few elderly residents who frequented the courtroom for lack of other entertainment, leaned forward, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama, their eyes fixed on the stranger who had dared to challenge the judge with a boldness rarely seen. Vanessa Hayes' story was one of quiet perseverance, a testament to resilience forged in the crucible of hardship that defined so many lives in this mountain town. Born in Fairmont to a miner father, Thomas Hayes, a man whose hands were calloused from years of digging coal in the dark tunnels, and a school cafeteria worker mother, Clara, who served meals with a smile despite her own fatigue. She grew up in a modest cabin where love was abundant, but luxuries were scarce. The cabin, with its creaking floors that groaned underfoot and drafty windows that let in the mountain chill during winter nights, was filled with the laughter of Vanessa and her two brothers, Mark and Daniel, who teased her about her love for books and her habit of reading by candlelight when the power failed. When her father died in a mining accident at 10, a tragedy that left the family reeling with the wail of the emergency siren still echoing in her memory and the sight of his empty chair at the dinner table, a constant reminder, Vanessa watched her mother transform into a pillar of strength, raising them on a widow's pension supplemented by cleaning jobs that left her hands rough and her spirit weary. At 14, she took a job at the diner, her small hands scrubbing dishes and serving coffee to tired truckers who tipped her with quarters and kind words, her tips adding to the household funds as she counted each coin with care under the dim light of the kitchen table. She dreamed of becoming a nurse, excelling in biology during late-night study sessions under a flickering bulb that swayed with every gust of wind, her textbooks marked with notes in the margins, and in literature where she lost herself in stories of courage and redemption that inspired her to persevere. But life intervened at 27 when she became pregnant with Lily after a brief marriage to Jake Miller, a logger who promised a future together with a log cabin in the woods but left when the mill closed and money ran dry, taking his dreams with him and leaving behind only a faded photograph of their wedding day. Noah's birth followed from a relationship with Paul Carter, a mechanic who swore stability with a garage full of tools and a smile that promised forever, but vanished after the first diaper change, leaving Vanessa with nothing but a broken wrench as a memento of his departure. Vanessa's days were a relentless cycle of responsibility that tested her endurance. Her job as a caregiver at the Fairmont nursing home demanded long hours, tending to residents with a gentleness that won their hearts, helping with baths that required patience, preparing meals with a smile that hid her own hunger, and listening to their stories of youth while masking her own struggles behind a warm facade that cracked only in the privacy of her home. The pay was low, a meager wage that barely covered rent on their tiny apartment with its peeling paint and creaky floors that echoed with every step, and the hours were irregular, often requiring her to juggle shifts with school runs along icy roads and late-night homework help. Lily's love for animals filled her sketches with horses and dogs, her pleas for a pet, a constant reminder of Vanessa's unfulfilled promise, while Noah's energy kept her moving. His questions about the mountains, why do they touch the sky? A source of joy amidst the struggle. The bad check was a desperate act, written during a storm that battered the town with rain and hail, soaking her children's beds and leaving mold spots on the walls, her delayed paycheck from the nursing home, caused by a payroll glitch that left her scrambling to explain to the manager, a final straw. She regretted it instantly, her hands shaking as she handed over the check. But Harold Grayson's refusal to negotiate, his voice cold over the phone, sealed her fate. Judge Leonard Vaughn's career was built on tough love, a philosophy shaped by his early years as a prosecutor during a crime wave of cattle rustling and theft that threatened the town's stability in the late 90s. Elected to the bench, he favored maximum sentences, believing they protected the community's moral fabric, a belief reinforced by his mentor, a hard-nosed judge who preached order above all. His courtroom was his domain, where the gavel's strike was final, a sound that echoed like a judge's decree in ancient times, and excuses, whether tears or tales of hardship, were met with disdain, dismissed as attempts to manipulate the system. Critics called him rigid, a relic of a bygone era, but supporters saw a guardian of order. For Vanessa, he saw only a forger, her story irrelevant to his legal stance. Dr. Evelyn Whitaker was the wild card, a figure who brought an unexpected twist with her quiet authority. In her late 60s, with short gray hair framing a face marked by wisdom, piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through pretense, and a demeanor that commanded respect, she had moved to Fairmont a year ago. Known for library literacy classes where her soft voice inspired children, she lived in a cozy cottage with a garden of roses, her past a mystery. Her presence hinted at a formidable history. As Evelyn approached the bench, the room held its breath. "Your Honor, I know Vanessa. She cares for nursing home residents with compassion, often staying late. This was desperation after a storm. Reconsider for her children." Vaughn, skeptical, asked, "Why listen? Are you her lawyer?" "No, Evelyn replied. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Whitaker, former Chief Justice of the Montana Supreme Court." Gasps filled the room. Vaughn paled. "Chief Justice? I didn't know." "You saw a criminal, not a mother," she pressed. "Show mercy." Vaughn relented. 2 years probation, 200 hours community service, $200 restitution over a year, first payment deferred. Vanessa wept with relief, saved by Evelyn. A secret bond awaited. Vanessa's grit shone through loss and single parenthood, the check a last resort. Vaughn's rigidity met Evelyn's reformist plea. Evelyn, a retired Chief Justice, met Vanessa at the nursing home, acting on her arrest. News spread, sparking change. Vanessa thrived. Vaughn retired. Reforms followed. Their bond? Evelyn defended Vanessa's mother years ago, noting her strength. This proved one voice's power. Have you faced unfair judgment? Would you stand for a stranger? Share below. Subscribe for more. Hit that button now.